We're going to continue on. This next segment actually is, again, focusing on strong family values, and we are going to emphasize on this question: what is the natural family, and why is it important? We have with us a distinguished colleague, Dr. Allan Carlson, who is actually here. I've not actually had the opportunity to meet him, but I did see him come in just a little bit earlier. I'm going to read his bio for you and then get him up here as quickly as I can. Dr. Carlson actually is the president of the Howard Center for Family, Religion, and Society in Rockford, Illinois, and international secretary for the founder of the World Congress of Families. He has been distinguished visiting professor of history and politics at Hillsdale College, and for the last 5 years. He is the author of numerous books, including Fractured Generations: Crafting a Family Policy for the 21st Century in America, The Natural Family, a Manifesto, The Swedish Experiment in Family Politics, and The Family in America. Carlson earned a BA from Augustana College and his PhD in European History from The Ohio State University. I want you to give a warm welcome to our colleague, Dr. Allan Carlson.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, the title of the conference is Defending the Natural Family, and my job is to offer a few words of explanation as to what exactly the term natural family means. Where did it come from? It actually grew out of the project known as the World Congress of Families, which we launched back in 1995. Specifically, though, the concept was developed in 1998. The context was this. At that time, the United Nations had become a center for family policy making. The problem was the term family proved extremely slippery. And a group of radicals, of socialists, were using the term family to push through a very radical agenda involving abortion rights, involving the celebration and normalization of non-procreative sexuality. And the time came to develop and advance a term that could be used by defenders of the family, of what had been called the traditional family. We brought together in 1998, actually meeting in the city of Rome, in a room that had been constructed in the 2nd century before Christ. We brought together a group of religious people, but of various backgrounds. We had Protestants there. There were Roman Catholics, Mormons, Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, Orthodox Jews, Sunni and Shiite Muslims. In a sense, it was the whole family of the children of Abraham who came together for that meeting. And we developed a definition of what we called the natural family. It was read, I think, briefly at the beginning of this morning's session, but let me just repeat it, what we came up with at that meeting. The natural family is the fundamental social unit, inscribed in human nature and centered around the voluntary union of a man and a woman in a lifelong covenant of marriage, for the purposes of satisfying the longings of the human heart to give and receive love, welcoming and ensuring the full physical and emotional development of children, sharing a home that serves as the center for social, educational, economic, and spiritual life, building strong bonds among the generations to pass on a way of life that has transcendent meaning, and extending a hand of compassion to individuals and households whose circumstances fall short of these ideals. That's our definition. Now, it was informed by several prior, or I should say rather informed by other factors. One of those was, in fact, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, one of the early documents of the United Nations, which was and remains an extraordinary document. It was informed actually by Judeo-Christian principles very strongly. We can trace how those entered into the document. Among those was Article 16, which states the family is the natural and fundamental social unit of society, is entitled to protection by society and the state. Other parts of that document also make it very clear that we're not talking about just any random group of individuals that could be redefined as a family. Marriage is declared to be a human right, but it's very clear that it's a marriage between a man and a woman voluntarily entered. Children are recognized as belonging not to the state, but as belonging to their parents, with educational rights that derive from that. Again, the UN Declaration of Human Rights, a strong, positive statement rooted in Judeo-Christian values. And so we came up with this term, natural family, to counter the anti-family activism that was quite strong in the 1990s. And I should remark that the Clinton administration of that time was using the United Nations to press and pursue an anti-family agenda. The term, though, natural family, has some other qualities that I think make it important. First of all, the term suggests strongly that there is a natural order to the world, a natural law, an order, part of the order of creation. And this family structure is part of that, and that it's not something that varies across cultures or across races or in history, that it's overwhelmingly self-evident that the family system of human beings has some fundamental core characteristics, always has and always will. Also, it escapes from some problems with other ways of defining the family. Back in the mid-20th century, a popular term was the nuclear family. And on one hand, that meant mom and dad and their kids in a house. But I always disliked the term nuclear. It sounded kind of like a bomb or something. And so I think it's a bad term. And I'm glad we could get away from it. The other term that was common, and again, a good one in a way, traditional family. Sure. Traditional family. Mom, dad, the kids, the relatives, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. The problem with the term traditional family, though, is that it looks backwards. And it sort of suggests that it was something that used to be or used to work, but that the modern era needs something different and something new. The term natural family also is a positive statement. Too much of what's passed for social conservatism focuses just on negatives. We're opposed to this, we're opposed to that. We oppose contraception, or we oppose abortion, or we oppose same-sex marriage. Well, that's all well and good. Sometimes you do have to oppose things. But the term natural family is a positive expression. And it links the precious reality of a family with the natural or the created order as part of the will of God. Well, in 2005, a colleague of mine, Paul Merrow, and I expanded that definition into a little book called The Natural Family, a Manifesto. And copies of this are available here at the conference, and I hope you'll pick one up. They're free of charge. Eventually it became a much larger book, but I want to focus on this document in particular, The Natural Family, a Manifesto, and explain what we tried to do in this document. Well, as we all know, statistics on marriage and family are not very promising these days. The marriage rate is tumbling. Cohabitation, singlehood are spreading among young adults quite rapidly. The average age of first marriage is climbing, both among women and men, to historic highs. The proportion of adults who never marry is also climbing toward an historic high. The proportion of births to unmarried women, which seemed 15 years ago to finally be stabilizing at about a third of the population, Oh, that number's climbing again. Today, it's over 40% of babies are born outside of marriage. Among African Americans, of course, the figure is quite a bit higher. No longer confined just to the poor, unmarried parenthood is now spreading among the middle class and even among the professional classes. Simply, marriage is being abandoned by the people that should marry. The Pew Research Center kind of put a point on this recently. As recently as 1990, the Pew researchers reported that 2/3 of Americans still agreed that children, quote, were very important to a successful marriage. Today, 20 years later, only 1/3 of Americans believe that children are important. You may have seen the Time magazine cover a couple of weeks ago, celebrating the so-called child-free marriage. Something's really disturbing and wrong about that. Now, this delinking, this tearing apart of the relationship between marriage and parenthood is not just a cosmetic problem. At the legal level, certainly, this divorce, if you'll have it, of marriage and children has given significant encouragement to the very concept of same-sex marriage. As the argument goes, if marriage is less and less about creating and nurturing children and more about adult companionship and non-procreative or sterile sexuality, how can you deny the benefits of marriage to same-sex couples? It's a very good question. Most importantly, though, this delinking, this tearing apart of the relationship between marriage and children hurts the children themselves that are born. Now, the overwhelming message of the social sciences is that children do best when they're raised by their two biological parents in a marriage-based home. I mean, this evidence is overwhelming. Any variation from that model, be it cohabitation, be it single parenting, be it step parenting, be it same-sex couples, households, any variation away from the two biological parent married couple family leads to higher risks for the children that are involved. These children are going to be more likely to do poorly in school, more likely to abuse alcohol and drugs, more likely to attempt suicide, more likely to run afoul of the law. They're also less likely to be healthy, to be happy, to be productive, to be civically engaged. We know that marriage delivers health and wealth, longer life, happiness to the women and men who take these vows. We also know that living alone, being intentionally single, divorce, same-sex coupling, cohabitation are more closely bound to sickness, domestic violence, financial stress, depression, premature death. And for all of these reasons, the retreat from marriage, which is very pronounced in our time, also means the rapid growth of the state, of government. The failure of families to form quickly swells the public costs of welfare, child care, health care, schooling, police patrols, prisons, all the way through the list. It also reduces the number of employed, tax-paying, responsible persons. That's not just an American problem. In fact, the most extreme cases of this occur in Europe, in the bloated European welfare states. I studied Sweden very closely, a nation that decades ago resolved to move away from a marriage-based culture. The result is a bloated welfare state system. A free society with limited government is simply not possible among a people where the birth of children within marriage has ceased to be the normal expectation. And I think it's fair to say the United States is very close to reaching that crisis point. Well, the failure here is not just one of laws and institutions. Rather, as a friend of mine, historian Wilfred McClay, teaches at the University of Tennessee, as he puts it, it's also been a failure of vision. He writes here, "The problem is not serial divorce," that's several repeated divorces, "nor gay marriage, nor widespread elective childlessness, nor the general disregard for the lives of the very young and very old. Those are only symptoms. The deepest problem is the loss of a generally shared vision, firmly grounded in nature, of what the family is and why our destiny as individuals and as a society is inseparable from its proper functioning. The consequences of this lack of vision are particularly acute for young people." So, the central purpose of this little book, The Natural Family and Manifesto, is to put forward our vision for the future. By our, at the most limited level, Paul Merrill and mine, but I think many people share it. Again, one that's not tied down by, I think, tired language, and again I use the word traditional family as a tired phrase, or by negativism. And we actually summarize this vision in 2 paragraphs, and if you have a copy of the document, it's actually on pages 13 and 14. It's what I consider the core of this document. And here's what we say. "We see a world restored in line with the intent of its creator. We envision a culture found both locally and universally that upholds the marriage of a woman to a man and a man to a woman as a central aspiration for the young. This culture affirms marriage as the best path to health, security, and fulfillment. It casts the home built on marriage as the source of true political sovereignty, the fountain of democracy. It also holds the household framed by marriage to be the primal economic unit, a place marked by rich activity, material abundance, and broad self-reliance. This culture treasures private property in family hands as the rampart of independence and liberty. It celebrates the marital sexual union as the unique source of new human life. We see these homes as open to a full quiver of children, the source of family continuity and social growth. We envision young women growing into wives, homemakers, and mothers, and we see young men growing into husbands, home builders, and fathers. We see true happiness as the product of persons enmeshed in vital bonds with spouses, children, parents, and kin. We look to a landscape of family homes, lawns, and gardens busy with useful tasks and ringing with the laughter of many children. We envision parents as the first educators of their children. We see homes that also embrace extended family members who need special care due to age or infirmity. We view neighborhoods, villages, and townships as the second locus of political sovereignty. We envision a freedom of commerce that respects and serves family integrity, and we look to nation states that hold the protection of the natural family to be their first responsibility. Well, actually, this was issued now 7-8 years ago, and it stirred up strong emotions. Let me just give you a couple of examples. There was a group, a nonprofit group called Unmarried Americans. I don't know if you knew about them. They declared the manifesto to be, quote, un-American and abnormal. The sharpest reactions came over our phrase celebrating homes open to a, quote, full quiver of children, good biblical phrase. One critic, Ann Spalding, concluded that Paul Merrill and I have, quote, an unhealthy fixation on procreation. Maybe so. A town council out in Utah, in Kanab, Utah, adopted this vision statement as a formal resolution, approved it. But the wrath of liberal America fell upon this little place of about 2,000 people. The New York Times called for a national boycott of this tourist-dependent town. Hundreds of protesters descended on the little village. The women wore buttons bearing the word "quiverless," no children. Okay. Now, it is true that our manifesto is unabashedly pro-natalist, pro-birth. We favor the birth of babies in responsible homes. That's because with the population bomb, the thing we used to hear about in the 20th century, that was the last century's fixation. The problem facing the future is demographic implosion, depopulation, the lack of children. Because it is true, it always has been and always will be, that only those nations that welcome and encourage larger families built on marriage will have a viable future. Let me just conclude, because I know we're running a little late right now, just by how we end up this document. Because again, it's a vision document, that's what it's meant to say. And what we're trying to do here is also clarify that we now face a fundamental choice. There is a conflict of worldviews taking place right now. On the one side, there is a worldview, probably the dominant one, certainly in these years. It's secular, it's anti-religious, it's libertine, transforming freedom into the celebration of vice. It is individualistic in morality and collectivist or socialist in political philosophy. There's another, though, and it's the worldview that I think our document tries to encompass, which casts the natural family as the fundamental social unit with its own institutional, cultural, and political claims, which serve as the bulwark of liberty against the Leviathan state. What we try to present in the manifesto and in the concept of natural family is a concise and positive statement of that alternative worldview. Let me just close by looking at what we have, a call, which again appears on page 35 of the document, right at the very end. But I'd like to end on a note of hope, because I've talked about some discouraging things. The call. A new spirit spreads in the world, the essence of the natural family. We call on all people of goodwill, whose hearts are open to the promptings of this spirit, to join in a great campaign. The time is close when the persecution of the natural family, which is happening, when the war against children, when the assault on human nature shall end. The enemies of the natural family grow worried. A triumph that not so many years ago they thought complete is no longer sure. Their fury grows. So do their attempts, ever more desperate, at coercion. Yet their mistakes also mount in number. They misread human nature. They misread the times. We are all called to be the actors, the moral citizens in this drive to realize the life ordained for us by our Creator. Our foes are dying of their own choice. Those who do not procreate die. We have a world to gain. Natural families of all races, nations, and creeds, let us unite. Godspeed to you all.